Hello, all my Eagles supporting senors and senoritas. I thought today would be a good time to do the preview for the North Melbourne game. So I have done a separate preview with my friend Jay from the Centre Bounce, which is up on the channel that released yesterday morning. Obviously, that was more of a yarn, all things Eagles and North Melbourne going into this game. Now I'm going to do my usual format preview, which I still like to do now that the teams are out. So we do have some confirmed team news, which is interesting. We'll get into all of that. But first, we'll go through the usual format. So, big game against North Melbourne in a sense. I think there has been some parity between these two teams as, dare I say it, the laughingstock of the competition for the best part of 3 years. And now Richmond's come to join the party. It's not that we've really moved up too much, it's just that Richmond's fallen through a hole. That being said, North, I think, are showing some real signs of starting to approach getting to that next phase of their rebuild, which is climbing out of the bottom two, which is very real possibility this weekend if they beat us. If they beat us by a decent amount, they could leapfrog us this weekend. And then who knows after that? We've got a couple of big games against Carlton and Geelong after that. So that's kind of what's on the line here, is playing for 16th versus 17th. To what extent do we value that? I think that we could probably benefit from getting a slightly better draft pick, but I still want to win this game. Part of this is ego-driven, where I tipped the Eagles to finish one spot higher than North at the start of the year. And, I got some criticism for that. And if we lose this game, then I'm probably going to get that wrong, whereas right now I'm still kind of correct. So, the form lines of these two teams have been a little bit divergent. I think North have put together a really good couple of months, some really honourable losses, 3 wins in that period. We were the first when they beat us at Optus Stadium earlier this year. Shocking performance from us, 2 goals, 15 at three-quarter time. That's not the best version of us. So, the best version of us can win this game. Will we see it this week? We'll get into that again. But nonetheless, I probably wouldn't read too much into that. That was maybe not the start, but it was certainly the early stages of us just falling into this horrible run of form that eventually cost us our senior coach. So 3 of the last 4 weeks have been much better. I'm optimistic it can go better. But on North, those 3 wins, they beat the Gold Coast as well, they beat us, and their other win was against Richmond on the weekend. So they climb up to 3 wins, chasing their 4th, which would be their best season in some time. Equally, we've just hit that with our win over the Gold Coast Suns. An interesting variable here is Tasmania. The conditions are going to be interesting. So, in my preview with Jay, I watched it back and I realised I talk a lot about the game as though it's going to be wet weather, whereas the forecast doesn't say that. I think I'm speaking hypothetically. Regardless, Tasmania does tend to produce blustery games. The breeze down there is something that North used to navigate really well when they were, in the finals mix. And that's, evidenced by the fact that the last time we actually played here was our premiership year, and we got done by 7 goals. I think around that time I was sulking, thinking the premiership dream was over, and thankfully I was wrong. But, we're not particularly good there, but it has been so long ago that it probably doesn't matter. I still have concerns over our ability to navigate these conditions potentially, unless it's a perfect day for football, considering we have once again gone with a tall forward line. I understand the logic for going tall, leading with our strengths, and also incorporating some of our best young talents, including, namely Jack Williams, who's coming off a great game, and Jack Darling's also coming off a great game. So I think that's going to be a vulnerability for us. You also consider the fact that Barras is out for this game, Harry Edwards is out for this game, Rhett Bazzo was not selected, so we're going with McGovern, and Jinby's named at centre-half back. It works in our favour to some extent. North don't play a strong, or at least a tall forward line, Larky is obviously a gun, always tears us up, and getting a reliable matchup for him will be tricky, considering Gov does his best, I think, playing as a roaming defender. So that's going to be a vulnerability, considering he's a gun. They also tend to run with a second key forward in Bryn Teakle. Not a massive threat in terms of goals. He's just more of a structural piece. If it's Jimby that lines up on him, I think there's about a 12 centimetre difference or a 10 centimetre difference between those two. So something to consider as well. But their backline is also exceptionally short. So, Griffin Logue's, I think, been ruled out for the rest of the season. So their backline will consist, I think it's named Comben, Aiden Core, Toby Pink. 2 of those guys are a little bit on the short side. So we'll definitely have them for height up forward. It's just whether this game will be conducive to that, considering I think it's going to be a messy day with skills, something we're not particularly strong at anyway. George Wardlaw's not playing for them, nor is Zach Fisher, who was a fitness test. They brought in Shields and Bergman. Dylan Stevens misses with an ankle. Jaden Stevenson misses with a hand. And I think Stevenson played all right, particularly in the second half last week. So that'll be interesting. Structurally, that's what's happening. As for team news, we brought in Andrew Gaff. That is the one change. Gaff for Tom Barras. And we are listing a particularly short backline, as I said. So Gaff comes in. Now, does he start as a sub? Not sure. I suppose the sub decision will probably be out of him or Clay Hall. I think Johnson did enough. I think Dewar is too important as a forward. So for list balance, it'll be Gaff and Hall. I don't really mind who gets the starting position versus the sub. I know it might seem counterintuitive considering we're trying to blood the youth, but Clay Hall has just had a little taste of AFL, and if he plays the sub again, let's just say I'm not too concerned. So Gaff announced his retirement, not a big surprise. I do want to do more on Gaff. I haven't really mentioned it much, but wonderful servant in this football club. I've spoken about how I've appreciated his loyalty, I've appreciated his hard work in the waffle this year. The right thing to do was to drop him. I'm fine with him coming back in, considering the context and where we're at in the season. It doesn't really matter. We're playing a lot of young guys anyway. Chess is playing the waffle. I think that's probably best for him right now. So I do think, his form has also been decent in the waffle. It's not as though he's been stinking it up there and we're really compromising this game. We still have a lot of youth in the team. So I'm happy enough with it. It sounds like he'll play his final game against Carlton. That will take him to 300 games when they include pre-season games. If you've missed it, if you play 300 games, including pre-season games, you get AFL Life's membership, even though I think his actual career tally will end up at like 280 or something like that. I suppose one more thing on selection. Matthew Flynn, again, not selected. I've been thinking about why that possibly is, and it's interesting. We recruited him as the number one ruck, and, I just would simply say that a couple of things. His body has broken down a couple of times this year. He's missed some football. Letting him sit in the waffle for a little bit builds up his conditioning, probably sets him up for success a little bit better. Is it simply that? I'm not too sure. It could also just be that the nature of our team and our structure has changed. So, I think maybe at the start of the year, we wouldn't have forecasted Jack Williams coming on so well, playing Jake Waterman as well. Waterman, Allen, Darling, and Williams, of course, gives us a tall forward line. So this combo of Bailey and Flynn probably don't work together that well if you've already got a tall forward line. So we're really talking Bailey versus Flynn, and I think Bailey's had a good couple of weeks. So that's probably my thoughts on why we haven't selected Matt Flynn. It's just that we're getting too tall, and the situation has changed slightly. There's always got to be a stats section of this. We'll get to that in a minute. I actually want to start with age. So just a couple of observations I found going through the stats prior to this game. So in the last 5 weeks, West Coast are the equal fifth youngest team in the competition over the last 5 weeks, specifically the selected 23 players. And I think there is some value in that. It just signifies this transitional change. There's been a lag where, we felt like we were rebuilding, playing younger guys, but our age demographic was huge. So it's just some visual representation that we are genuinely getting younger, which we should have known by the selection last week, but that's over a 5-week period. It also made us younger and less experienced than Fremantle, and the only reason I mention that is because sometimes they lord it over us that they're still younger than us, but finally we just dipped below that for whatever it's worth. So we're the 5th youngest and 4th least experienced over the last 5 weeks, so there's something to be said for that. We're coming up against North, who are 3rd least experienced and 3rd youngest. A lot more hard draft picks in that team than there are for us, for sure. Interestingly as well, no team has fielded more players in the last 5 weeks than West Coast. So that just demonstrates that we're turning over the list. Some of that has been injury. We've had some bad luck over the last few weeks. We got our injury list looking real sweet. Then it's just sort of unraveled a little bit with a few injuries, players being put on ice and stuff. But we've played 32 players. That's the same as Collingwood and the Blues, who have, different injury crises at the moment to different extents, but it just demonstrates that we're getting younger, we're exposing lots of players, we're getting less experienced. So yeah, you can just see the transition in the list. So now for a little bit of a stats profile. Interestingly, I noticed that North are number 1 in the competition for disposal efficiency and kicking efficiency over the last 5 weeks. So their ball use is good. Obviously, that's just a one-dimensional stat. We're actually top 6 for all efficiency stats, and we're number 3 in handball efficiency. So what I mean by all efficiency stats, you've got disposal efficiency, you've got kicking efficiency, you've got handball efficiency. So we're top 6 across all those stats and number 3 in handballs, which is good considering we've played a pretty high pressure style in the last 4 or 5 games, particularly the last 4. And to be doing that and also using the ball well, that's actually reasonably good, although, like I said, it is a one-dimensional stat. It hasn't felt like we've been using the ball particularly well. Gold Coast was better than, some of the previous games, but there we go. North are top 6 in contested ball, we're 18th. North are number 2 in the last 5 weeks for hard ball gets, and we are 14th. I think Geelong is number 1, and North Melbourne are 2nd. Geelong's won 4 of the last 5, interestingly. North, however, are 17th in inside 50 differential. We're 16th. So that's the one stat we've been better at over the last 5 weeks. The difference between us conceding and getting ball inside 50. Top 6 clearance side and 3rd in the league for stoppage clearances. Again, this is all over the last 5 weeks. So their clearance game, LDU in particular, Wardlaw's a big factor in that. He's not going to play, which is worth noting, but they are a pretty good clearance side, and I think that is going to be a big driver in which way this game goes. They're also, interestingly, top 6 in the league for defensive one-on-ones. So I've highlighted their, relatively small backline. Commons come on as a key defender pretty well this year, so that's something for them. But generally speaking, one-on-one, they're a pretty good defensive side over the last 5 weeks. So that's a bit of a profile to evidence that North is going better than us. Over a run of form. That doesn't mean we're definitely going to lose, but it's worth noting that they have certainly improved, and in particular, their pressure and their ability to win the ball out of the centre and in a contested situation are strengths of theirs, and this is what we try to build our game around. Now, where's this going to be won and lost? I think I said in the J preview, we can talk about heights and ball use going inside 50 with the conditions. Both teams have some structural gaps. Both teams have a short back line. They've got a short forward line, and we've got a really tall forward line. But I do think the biggest predictor of how well we're going to go is how well we're going in contested ball. When we get slapped in this stat, we get slapped in general. When we've won or broken even in this particular stat, we've either played really well and lost, or we've won the game handsomely. And I think from the outset, that's how this game is going to be decided. There's no way West Coast get butchered when we're going for the ball in dispute and still make a game of this and keep it close. Now, I am leaning towards being pessimistic. And to be honest, my pessimism or optimism and my tip and my prediction should be the thing you pay attention to least in these previews. I think people in the past have chipped me for my predictions. Fair enough, I get them wrong, but I don't want people to misinterpret what the point of the preview is. I would just want to talk about this game from all different angles and ultimately just give the perspective of how I'm feeling. And how I'm feeling is a cognitive bias towards thinking West Coast are going to let me down this week. And there are some reasons for that. The Tasmania factor sounds like we're pretty banged up. Oh, as an aside, I want to clarify some fake news I distributed. I thought Jamie Cripps had done an AC joint, and I mentioned that in my preview. He's fine, he's playing. Sorry about that. I should have said that at the start of this video, but I didn't see any comments about it, so nobody watched it. But regardless, we're sore. A couple of injuries. Injuries are not going to be an excuse if we lose this game. That's not going to be the deciding factor. I just have a lack of faith in this Eagles side. Producing consistently. We've played a high-pressure brand, and I think it's possible we'll have an emotional dump. And I also think that North Melbourne have just been better than us for an extended period of time now. They've been fairly consistent over the last 2 months, with one bad loss to Sydney, who at the time, weren't the Sydney they are right now. Regardless, you give them a let off for that. And by contrast, we've played 3 out of the last 4 games pretty well. We could play well in this game, but I tell you what, if we do, that will be an improvement because we've been terrible at home, but we have also just not been consistent at all this season. Save for some of our best wins and performances this year, it's been an inability to really back up some good form previously. So that would be progress if we play well. And that's what I'm ultimately looking for. I do want the 4 points. I do want to finish higher than North. But there is a possibility, given that North is pretty good now, at least, by rebuilding standards, there is a possibility we play well and lose, and then the focus just goes to, well, how do the young guys go? What development and progress are we seeing? So I am prepared for the worst, and the worst for me would be like a 7-goal loss. I'm prepared for that. I don't know how well we're going to handle Hobart. I'm optimistic for the best, but I tell you what, if Schofield does get this group to play well again and then backs it up with decent performances to finish the year, then I think that's at the point where you say, okay, that's genuine improvement at the moment, and that will only help his case to become senior coach permanently. So yeah, I'm tipping North. Again, this is probably the biggest favour I can give you is tipping North because I have not tipped, I've only tipped West Coast twice this year, and both times ended terribly. And I have not tipped us in any of our wins, so I'm going to continue that trend and hope it goes well. I'll be streaming on the True Footy YouTube channel as well, 4:45 a.m. UK time. Can't wait to see it unfold. I'm going to be excited for it, but I'm looking forward to your comments, your thoughts, your predictions for this video. Let me know in the comments, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.